Welcome in, everyone, to Lively Lewis Stories.
That's right. We're back with even more awesome adventures with Levi and Ivy.
Set your storytime meter to fun and get ready to join the Lively Lewis crew.
All you need is your imagination and...
Off we go! I can't wait to see where our story takes us today.
Have you ever wanted to get more Lively Lewis in your life?
Well, we've got you covered.
Grab an adult and zoom over to livelylewisshop.com.
Or just click on the link in our show notes.
Enough about that. Let's get to today's super Lively Lewis story.
Mom, called Levi as he walked into the house after school. Mom, are you here? Yeah, I am right here, answered Levi's mom as she walked into the living room. How was school? But she didn't have to wait long for an answer because the look on Levi's face said it all. Not great. Levi had been having trouble at school recently with a few older boys who were not being the nicest to him on the soccer field at recess. They often wouldn't let him play at all, and when they did, they wouldn't pass to him and would run plays that excluded Levi from the action. Are those boys still giving you problems at recess? Asked Levi's mom as she gave her son a hug. Your dad and I will contact your principal and teacher again. We'll do whatever we can to help you out. We're all on your team, buddy. Those words of encouragement and a great big hug were just what Levi needed as his mom could feel his stress from the day melt away when she showed how much she cared for him. Levi dropped his backpack on the ground and hugged his mom tight. She could tell he was crying and brought him over to the couch to sit down. Just as she was about to ask him what happened that day specifically, Ivy walked in through the door, and she didn't look much better than Levi. Mom, said Ivy before the tears started to roll down her cheeks as well. Oh no, sweetie, what's wrong? Asked Ivy's mom as she opened her arms wide, letting Ivy know there was room in her big hug for one more kiddo that needed it. Ivy hugged her mom, wiped her eyes, and began to tell her a story about what happened that day. And Ivy didn't need to ask why Levi was crying. She already knew the reason. I was at recess today, and I was jumping rope with some friends when all of a sudden I heard some shouting coming from the soccer field, said Ivy as she began to tell her story. I ran over because I knew Levi was playing soccer, and I wanted to make sure everyone was okay. You're very sweet to do that, Ivy, said her mom, so proud of her daughter's caring nature. When I got to the field, I saw Levi standing alone by the fence while two of the older boys, who were clearly the team captains, were arguing back and forth, continued Ivy until Levi interrupted, speaking for the first time since he got home. They were arguing over me, said Levi. Were they arguing over which one could have you on their team? Said Levi's mom, hopeful that Levi was finally being included at recess. No, just the opposite, answered Levi. They were arguing because neither of them wanted me on their team. Well, that's just silly, added Levi's mom. You're one of the best players in your age group. You were the top goal scorer last year and everything. I know, but since they play in the age group just above me, they think they're the best soccer players in the whole town, said Levi. They don't have any room for me on that field. Maybe I'll just stop trying to play with them. But I love playing soccer so much. It would make me sad to give that up at recess. Levi's mom felt terrible. She knew how much Levi loved soccer, and he always had so much fun playing at school until this year. Levi, I don't think that's the answer, said his mom. If you stop playing, then the older kid's bad behavior wins, and we can't have that happen. Then they'll think that they can act like that anytime. This is a moment in time when maybe if you talk with them, you can change the way they behave for the better. And when you do that, you stop them from making anyone else feel the way you're feeling right now. Levi knew his mom was right, but standing up to those older kids wasn't something he felt comfortable doing. And then there was Ivy. Excuse me, did we forget that I was crying when I walked into the house? Asked Ivy. Oh, Ivy, I'm so sorry. You weren't done with your story yet, said her mom, focusing her attention back on Ivy. So, when I saw that Levi was upset, it made me upset, said Ivy. Because even though he can be annoying sometimes, like when he eats the last cookie without telling me, or when he uses my paintbrushes to clean the spokes on his bike, but he's still my brother, and I don't want to see him sad. Levi gave his sister a little smile, so thankful that she was so sweet and caring. I watched Levi standing there all alone against the fence, waiting to play soccer and have fun. And I started to cry, said Ivy. And that's when they showed up. Who? Asked Ivy's mom. This group of girls, one grade above me. I actually thought we were kind of friends. They like to hang out by the soccer field and make bracelets or draw during recess, explained Ivy. But today they were just there to make fun of me, it seemed. Ivy went on to explain that the older girls saw her crying, they called her a crybaby, and that made her feel really bad. I'm not a crybaby, said Ivy. I was crying because Levi looked so sad. I bet they would have done the same thing if someone they cared about was feeling sad. That's a good way to look at it, replied Ivy's mom. Did you tell them that? Ivy just looked down at the ground and shook her head no. She wanted to say those things and tell them that it's not nice to tease people. And how would they feel if they were in her situation? But instead, she just ran off, wanting to be as far away from them as possible so they couldn't tease her anymore. Did you tell your teacher, Ivy? Asked her mom. Again, Ivy just shook her head no. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, said Ivy, because if I did, my teacher would have made us talk about it, and I don't want to talk to them. But talking things out is the best way to resolve problems, said Ivy and Levi's mom. If you don't deal with the issue, then it can get worse and worse. It can make you stop playing a sport that you love, or it can make you run away and hide your true feelings. Ivy's mom went on to explain to her daughter that just like in Levi's situation, if she talked to those girls, maybe she would have helped them to see that the way they were acting was not very nice. She then told both her kids that it is important to let your emotions out, like they were both doing at home, and to never bottle them up and forget about them. Because over time, those strong emotions will build up, and that's no fun at all, which is why they had to talk to those kids at school before anything else happened. She also told Levi and Ivy that even though they may think they're hiding how they feel, that was not the case at all. You're both usually so confident and happy, but lately it seems like you're more quiet and down, said Levi and Ivy's mom. Your dad and I don't want to see you like that. And we know that you don't want to feel like that. We've given you some strategies to use, but unless you feel confident to stand up to the kids that are making you feel bad, then your dad and I will have to call the school again. Levi and Ivy both looked up at each other. They really wanted to try and solve their problems by themselves, but they knew it wouldn't be easy. But situations like this could come up at any time in their lives, and they knew they had to be prepared to handle them. Knowing, of course, that their parents, and in this case their teachers and principals, were always nearby to help. Mom, can you and Dad give Ivy and I a little time to think about how we could handle these situations? Asked Levi. We sure can, said Levi and Ivy's mom. How about you two take a walk? A nice long walk and some fresh air always helps me clear my head so I can focus on an important task. Levi and Ivy knew their mom was right, and they decided to take her advice and walk down the park in the neighborhood. It was one of their favorite places in the world, and if nothing else, they would get to run around a bit, have some fun, and try to put the day behind them for a little bit. We'll be back by dinner time, called out Levi as he and Ivy started out the door. Okay, kids, try to have some fun, and hopefully as your mood changes, you'll be able to think of the best way to deal with your individual situations at school, said their mom as she walked out to the backyard. Levi and Ivy quickly started off down their street. At first, they weren't talking very much, just looking up at the sky, counting clouds drifting by, and listening to the birds in the trees. Then out of nowhere, Levi said, I'm sorry you cried today. It was all because of me. You don't have to apologize at all, Levi, Ivy began as she stopped and looked at her brother. If anyone has to apologize, it's those soccer boys who were mean to you and those girls who are calling me names. We didn't do anything wrong. Levi smiled, knowing what a great sister and friend he had in Ivy. That makes a lot of sense, said Levi. Maybe if you and I talk to those kids together tomorrow at school, then we could let them know just how bad they're making us feel. Strength in numbers. I think it's what it's called, answered Ivy. I think the two of us together could do the trick. Wow, this walk is helping us out already. Levi and Ivy smiled and continued on the park. They were happy that they were already thinking of ways to resolve the issues they were having at school. And as a reward for their smart thinking, they were going to treat themselves with a few rides on the zip line and a slide down their favorite tube slide. But before they could reach the park, they stumbled upon a hedgerow that they had never seen before. Wow, what is that? Asked Ivy as she stood in awe of the gigantic wall of evergreens. Do you remember seeing that here before? Right at the entrance to the park, asked Levi. No, and I definitely think I'd remember seeing something so beautiful and enormous, replied Ivy. The hedgerow seemed to stretch on forever and looked completely impossible to go through. The thick green pine needles formed an almost solid living wall in front of them. However, they were curious as to what it was, why it was there, and if it was possible to see what was on the other side. Levi and Ivy, both being quite curious, decided to take a look through the millions of pine branches. That's when Levi said, "Do you see that?" Ivy knew exactly what he was referring to and called back, "A giant iron gate?" They didn't even need to think a second about what to do next. The two adventurous kids each reached out a hand and touched the gate. The cold, solid iron looked ancient, and both Levi and Ivy never would have imagined in a million years what would happen next. Gates are sometimes meant to keep people out of places. They're sometimes meant not to move and act as a barrier or obstacle to prevent people from moving forward. Well, not in this case. As soon as Levi and Ivy's small hands touched the gate, it swung open wide, as if it was waiting for them, revealing a most fantastic and magical-looking garden. "Levi, I don't think this is part of the park," said Ivy with a bit of a twinkle in her eye. The new world was different and unique, but that's what made it intriguing and exciting. "Do you think we should take a closer look?" asked Levi with the same twinkle in his eye. "I mean, as long as we don't walk too far from the gate, then I think we'll be okay," answered Ivy, already taking a few steps past the most amazing collection of flowers she had ever seen. "I think you made a great choice," said a voice from behind Ivy. "Thank you, Levi. I feel like this place looks pretty harmless, and if we just stay for a second, I don't think anything too crazy will happen," answered Ivy. "Yeah, I agree, Ivy, but I didn't say anything to you," said Levi, all of a sudden looking a bit nervous. So if Levi hadn't said anything, then who was Ivy answering? And where were they? It was after hearing Levi's response that Ivy began to question her decision to walk through the gate into the garden. They both spun around, looking this way and that, trying to figure out where and who the voice had come from. "If you want to find an answer, you have to look both high and low," said the voice. "What does that mean?" asked Levi, still searching for the voice. "I think we need to change our perspective and look down too," answered Ivy as she stared in amazement at where the voice was coming from. Until that moment, she and Levi had only been looking at what was in their eye line. But once Ivy looked toward the ground, that's when she saw a bunch of brilliant pink peonies. And underneath those fantastic flowers sat a very wise-looking tortoise. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," exclaimed Levi as he walked towards the giant tortoise. And if the fact that the tortoise wasn't talking enough, he was also wearing a little derby hat and a small pair of glasses. "I know. I always get that reaction when people first meet me," said the tortoise with a smile. "I'm a friend, though, and I have been expecting you." "You've been expecting us?" asked Ivy, sounding quite shocked. "You knew we were going to show up here? How?" "Well, this is a very special place. A place that only makes its presence known when someone, or some two in your case, needs my help," said the tortoise. "First of all, before we go any further, my name is Eldon, and this is the Garden of Friends." Eldon then went on to explain that the magical garden that surrounded them all was filled with many plants and creatures whose only goal that day was to make those around them feel respected, heard, and understood. But not all the creatures and plants acted that way all the time. So that's where the lessons can be learned and progress can be made. "Wow, what a wonderful place," said Levi, looking around. "I wish the soccer field at recess was like this." "And that is exactly the reason you're here," Eldon said quickly. "And because of those girls that made you cry today, Ivy, you're both here to learn a lesson about creating boundaries in your lives and making sure they're respected. By gaining this new courage, you will be able to help yourselves, others around you, and even the people that sometimes don't respect or care for your feelings. You can do that by showing them how their actions and words make you and others feel." Levi and Ivy knew this was just the place for them. They were ready to learn all they could. Before dinner time, of course. Eldon assured them that around every corner in the garden there were lessons to learn. They just had to keep their eyes open and always remember to look high and low. "I'm here to give you a challenge," Eldon began. "The challenge is broken up into 4 parts. Each part will have you helping a different garden friend to learn either courage, respect, clarity, or empathy. And as you help them, you will both learn from their experiences. And apply what you learn in those situations you're dealing with at school. With all this knowledge, you'll be confident enough to stand up for yourselves. This sounds great. I love helping others, said Levi. Me too, echoed Ivy. Let's get to that first quest. Hey friends, this is the end of part 1. Stay tuned for part 2. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the story and learned a little something too.
And since we know everyone has their own story, we'd love to hear yours.
If you have an idea for a Lively Lewis story, leave a comment on our Apple Podcast review page with 5 stars, your idea, and your little one's name.
Then maybe our next adventure will be with you.
Until our next Storytime Hangout.
Thanks for listening. We can't wait to share another fun Lively Lewis story with you.